Hello, my name is Gene Kim, your host for today's webinar on validating your imaging data to secure funding. Welcome and thank you in advance as we share with you some thoughts and insights on how early clinical imaging studies may play a role in your fundraising activities and what kind of initial imaging services can help support those studies. Our speakers for today are Jim Golendo and Catherine Chintala. Jim Golando has 30 plus years of experience in pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries. His expertise ranges from phase 1 through late stage development and life cycle management, with particular strengths in imaging clinical trials, clinical research, clinical operation, procurement, outsourcing, project and team leadership, and project management as well. He has overseen the operational and developmental planning and execution of global clinical trials in imaging, oncology, respiratory, endocrine, anti-infectives, and cardiology. Jim held senior leadership positions as the Chief of Operations at Aura and Median Technologies. He was previously VP of Medical Affairs at BioClinica and held clinical operation position at Schering-Plough, Novartis, and Hoffmann La Roche. Jim founded Golendo Advisory Group and has been consulting since 2012. And also we have Catherine Chintala, who works at Merit as a project manager in our oncology division. With 20 years of experience working in clinical trials and the CRO industry, she has expertise managing oncology clinical trials from startup to close out. Catherine works closely with sponsors, designing and implementing processes to meet project timelines and helping to ensure study needs are clearly communicated across the key stakeholders. Drawing upon her experience in a variety of indications and response criteria, Catherine can partner with any team to help make clinical trials a success. And our team has been going to conferences and has received many questions from various sponsors and companies from late preclinical through the early phase 1 clinical trials. And they have asked us how these imaging can fit into their study programs and when is the right time to add imaging to their study. We hope it will be helpful to share these questions and our thoughts with the wider audience on today's webinar. And starting with the question number 1, I have a question number 1 to Jim. When transitioning from preclinical to clinical studies, how is imaging related to fundraising activities?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Gene. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And that's an excellent first question to kick off today's discussion. So early phase studies are primarily designed to assess safety, pharmacokinetics, and in some cases, possibly identify a recommended phase 2 dose. And often, secondary objectives evaluate early clinical activity, which is typically assessed locally by the investigator. Now, generally speaking, in smaller biotech companies, it is this data from the studies which is used to generate publications, help in designing larger clinical studies, and used as a primary resource to secure funding. So the prospective collection of imaging data in these studies provides for consistency in image acquisition and helping to ensure overall quality of the images. But arguably, and maybe more importantly, allows for the possible central review of all or selected subject data to validate the locally observed response data.
Thank you very much for answering the question. And then I have a question number 2. Why do we need this approach with early phase studies?
So again, with this approach of prospectively collecting imaging data, but not initially completing reads, does a couple of things. It significantly reduces the cost of a full prospective central image review, which is typically done in larger pivotal clinical studies. And it's also important that in the collect and hold model, reads can be done once there is a clear indication or a clear sign of clinical activity based on the local assessment. Additionally, these reviews may be done only in selected subjects. For example, subjects that show clinical benefit, such as stable disease, partial response, or complete response, before taking a decision on evaluating all the subjects.
Thank you very much. And for better clarity to our audience, stable disease, or ST, is used to describe a tumor that is neither growing or not shrinking. And a partial response is decrease in the size of tumor or in the amount of cancer in the body. And a complete response is the disappearance of all signs of cancers in the body.
Great, thanks for that clarification, Gene. And again, once the decision is made to read and collect and hold model, it's usually done with one radiologist, which can significantly reduce both the time and the cost. Now, a key benefit in this approach is the ability to demonstrate that your study treatment effect has been independently validated. This helps to establish the scientific validity of the research and provides more robust evidence for the accuracy and reliability of the results. And most importantly, enhances the trust and confidence in the research findings and reduces the potential for bias.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your opinion. And I have question number 3. What are some potential obstacles with early imaging studies? And I would like to direct this question to Catherine based upon her experience in oncology studies.
Okay, thanks, Jean. As Jim mentioned, early phase studies are often looking at safety. The data is very closely monitored, and decisions about the study often have to be made very quickly. And although imaging doesn't always support the primary endpoint at that point in time, it's really critical that the data contained in the images isn't lost. Imaging will often be performed as a standard of care. In other words, the sites are going to perform this imaging anyway, and assessments will occur at that local level. But taking steps to proactively collect those images in a very standardized way can offer so many benefits. But of course, that's not without its obstacles. Working closely with an imaging core lab can help mitigate challenges, and these challenges can include things like support for busy study sites, variation of image acquisition and interpretation that can occur across a multitude of different sites, and a lack of centralized location for images performed at all these different sites and facilities. And working with an imaging core lab can also help mitigate not only these site challenges and image challenges, but also study management challenges, like assessing the status of subjects and time points, knowing where everything is in the process. You want to make sure that everything is very visible and transparent, and that you have that access to where all the time points are, as well as the data and the images themselves. It can also help with challenges like lack of access to subject matter experts and expert readers in different therapeutic areas and indications, navigating multiple software systems, and even agency guidance and response criteria. Working with an imaging expert can really help address all of these challenges.
Appreciate that, Catherine. And let's hear more from Jim. How can these potential issues be addressed in a cost-effective manner?
Yeah, thanks, Gene. So the issues Catherine nicely outlined are often considered when implementing, or not often considered when implementing an early phase study. Again, the focus typically is on safety, and a typical central review process can be costly and not justified in an early phase study. However, in many cases, early activity can be assessed, and including a collect and hold model for the imaging data can be invaluable and safeguard against the issues that we just mentioned. So the collect and hold process allows for the collection of high image quality by employing strict quality control measures. Dedicated imaging quality control experts are really critical to this process. They ensure the highest imaging, they ensure that the highest imaging standards are enforced, as well as being expert in the acquisition and processing of these images, which provide for both reliable and reproducible data. The consistency in image review and image evaluation from multiple sites as you can imagine, is extremely difficult, especially in multi-center studies. And to achieve this without the proper oversight and training is very, very difficult. So should a decision be made to review some or all subjects, this is typically done in the central review process by a very well-trained and experienced radiologist in a very controlled process that ensures the consistency of the review process. The process also ensures that all available images are prospectively collected, quality controlled, and stored.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, and for Catherine, based on your experience, how should sponsor companies and sites ensure good image quality from the beginning of the clinical trial?
Thanks, Jean. That is a great question. So working closely with an imaging expert as early as possible is critical. Sometimes an imaging core lab is brought into the study planning at a later stage, but we've actually found that incorporating the imaging into your early stages of planning is key. This results in a partnership between the sponsor and the imaging core lab. And this really ends up in ensuring that the most appropriate imaging parameters for the protocol and the charter are built into the study. And it also helps to ensure that the sites have clear expectations of the imaging that is needed. They will need to know what they'll have to do throughout the course of the study, what kind of scanners they have, are they capable of the imaging parameters that are needed to be fulfilled. Really, any potential questions and issues like that can be addressed up front rather than during the study when subjects are already having these imaging exams performed and sent in. We can address those up front and very early on. And also making imaging part of your early phase trial can offer benefits that really extend well beyond the study. And today we want to share with our audience for your consideration the value of Merit's collect and hold services in early clinical development studies and how they may help with fundraising. And just as a background, collect and hold services are the prospective collection and quality control of imaging studies for a clinical trial. That is getting all of your study images in one place and in a ready-to-read state.
Thank you. And for question number 4, how can collect and hold services accelerate the drug development timelines and provide better data outcomes?
So I can take that one as well. When you do collect and hold, the imaging data can be collected and stored in a secured, centralized location as soon as patients are enrolled in a clinical trial and they start to have those imaging exams performed. And the benefit is that you can analyze data quickly and make faster, more informed decisions, which is so important in these early phase studies. With high quality images already properly curated and stored in one place, you can also enjoy cost savings and avoid the time consuming and very resource intensive process of chasing down old images well after they were performed. And Merit's collect and hold service is a completely cloud-based software system with 24/7 availability of data, and it's powered by our transparent and streamlined Excelsior software platform. So it really can capitalize on all of the benefits we talked about before, the challenges that you can have in collecting images across a multitude of sites. The Excelsior software really helps to mitigate all of those. And collect and hold can benefit studies really in a variety of phases. One example of this could be early phase studies that we're talking about, studies that really aren't quite ready to invest in that full independent review can benefit from the standardized collection of images and then later transition very quickly and easily to an independent review. If you're trying to retrospectively collect images that were performed in the past, it's very challenging. I really like to think of the collect and hold services as an investment in your program's future. Making that small initial investment upfront will save both time and money, and not to mention frustration in the long run. And Merit's collect and hold services comply with FDA, EMA, and ICH guidelines, ensuring that all imaging data is collected and stored in accordance with regulatory requirements. And our collect and hold services are great. They really fit any study budget, allowing even small or early phase studies to realize all the benefits of working with an established imaging core lab.
All right, thank you. I appreciate for both Jim and Catherine for sharing your expertise and your opinions. And we have covered a lot of informations, and I wanted to leave you with a few key takeaways. Working with a clinical endpoint expert such as Merit can benefit your company in many ways. We can advise on reading criteria and endpoint selections, assist with the imaging parameters and acquisition guidelines, collect and quality check images, and provide independent blinded central review for your study. We have reached the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, please submit them now via the Q&A functionality. Prior to addressing your questions, over the next two slides, I would like to briefly highlight Merit's associated capabilities. Merit has provided image collection, centralized reading, and data management services for clinical trials since 2012. We're innovative, proven, and experienced. Using our innovative and proven technologies and intuitive, seamless workflow, Merit's experienced staff brings more than a decade of clinical endpoint expertise to ensure the success and integrity of your study and your program. More information can be found on our website at www.meritcro.com. We will now open the discussion for any questions you may have. All right. And I have one question from our attendees. What is the benefit of a collect and hold versus the retrospective collect and review?
Yeah, I'll take that one. That's a great question, Gene. So a collect and hold study, as you've heard, offers many benefits, but the main way it differs from a retrospective study is that the images are collected as they are performed, just as we would do in a full scope study. So in a retrospective study, what usually happens is a sponsor may have decided to collect the images typically after the study is complete, and maybe because they want to confirm findings with some other data they have, or a larger study, or some subset of patients. The challenges are that the scans were performed in the past, sometimes months or in many cases years before. And as you can imagine, having a site go back and retrospectively try to collect those images, as Catherine mentioned before, is not only difficult, but it's time consuming and costly. Another challenge is that the data that you get may be missing exams and or incomplete. And the third challenge is that the images weren't standardized to a single set of parameters. So you could have different levels of quality and or incomplete anatomical coverage. So doing the benefit of doing a collect and hold study now ensures that you collect standardized scans as they occur, which results in a much cleaner, more complete data set for images.
Thank you very much, Jim. And then I have another question came through here. Will a collect and hold component add any burden to the site staff?
Yeah, again, Gene, it's a great question, but it not at all. I mean, there really are no differences. Participating in a collect and hold study looks and feels just like a standard study from the point of view of a study site. A study site can expect to receive imaging resources and support from Merit. Any questions or queries about the scans can be addressed very close to when the scan was performed. And working with Merit also benefits the site because they interface with only one system. The web-based Excelsior software is a one-stop shop for imaging guides, queries, and it's the same place that they use to upload the images.
I see. Thank you very much. And I have another questions from our attendees here. Will adding collect and hold impact the study timelines?
Jean, I could take that one. And actually, before I address that question, just to kind of build on what Jim said, I've worked on retrospective studies before, and not only will doing a collect and hold prospectively lessen, it won't be any extra burden on the site staff. It will actually lessen the burden. Having worked on a retrospective study before, it is very difficult and frustrating, as we mentioned, to go back and try to collect scans that were done months or even years ago. So certainly there's a lot more querying and back and forth between a core lab and a site when we're trying to chase down something that was done long ago. So that's kind of another reason why doing a collect and hold prospectively actually lessens the burden on site staff. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But back to the latest question we got from the audience, will adding a collect and hold impact study timelines? No, in fact, performing a collect and hold can actually shorten timelines. If a sponsor chooses to do a collect and hold, meaning that we have all of the scans in-house, they have gone through our quality checks, any queries have been resolved, really you have a clean database of complete images ready to go. If that's the case and a sponsor has done that collect and hold and then later decides to expand the study scope to include an independent review, we can really gear up very quickly for a read. As I mentioned, the scans are in-house already. We've got our project documentation done. We can really just focus on doing a charter amendment, expanding the scope of the study and the contract and things like that. And we're really just expanding a study that has already been set up to include the read, getting the database configured just for the reads to be performed. The database has already been configured to house all of these scans, but we'll have to just expand that to have the read configurations and ECRFs done. So as you can imagine, this can be done in a much quicker fashion than starting from scratch and needing to really go through that entire study startup process, collecting scans, do quality control and queries, and kind of do that back and forth with the sites that I mentioned and get everything to a ready to read state. All that's been done. So if a sponsor would like to then read those scans and get that read assessment data, it's a much quicker startup time than to do it all from scratch.
I see. Thank you very much, Catherine.
You're welcome.
All right, and then let's see. I have another question here. What would be the timing for an implementation of the collect and hold study?
Mm-hmm. So I can take that since that kind of builds upon the last question. So to implement a collect and hold study, we will really follow all the same study startup sets that we, the sequences of events that we would for a full scope study. So after the study award, the team will really be in study startup mode. So creating all the study documents, things like the site manuals, materials, creating a project plan, a communication plan, and abbreviated charter. We would also be doing things like internal and external kickoff meetings and trainings, getting that database ready so sites can upload scans. We would really be in that study startup phase, and that usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Of course, every study is a little bit different, but that is a good rule of thumb for us. And we always work really closely with our sponsors just to make sure that we're respectful of their timelines and getting them the information that they need in time. So yeah, about 4 to 6 weeks, but we do make specific project plans for every study. So we would have unique timelines that we would work on with the sponsors for each study.
All right, thank you. What about the retrospective studies? What would be implementation timelines, and what are the challenges if we're thinking about the retrospective study standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with a retrospective study, we would really follow a lot of the same steps we would for a prospective study in terms of documentation, but we would not create site manuals, site surveys, things like that. We wouldn't be doing that prospective data collection of the scans with the site. So we wouldn't need any of that information. We would still do a charter, we would still do communication plans, a project plan, things like that. We would still need to build the database and create all of that study documentation. And another thing that we would have to do that's really critical is we would have to have a discussion with the sponsor about how to handle queries. We know things will be missing, things will be, maybe not up to the same standard in terms of the imaging quality and all of the anatomy that's included that you would prospectively have for a clinical trial. There is usually some differences between scans and imaging that's done for a clinical trial versus standard of care. So we would really have to discuss with the sponsor, what do we do when these queries come up, when we have issues? Do we go back to the sites? If something's missing, do we try to fix something, or are we going to immediately resolve any issues that are found? So that's really one of the main challenges with having a retrospective study, is any issues or things that are missing that come up, we likely wouldn't be able to resolve or replace. So that's really a big challenge. And we found that with retrospective studies is that when something is missing, it can result in gaps in the data when it comes time to do the read, and that can ultimately affect the quality of the read and even cause some lost responses. So at Merit, we're really passionate about helping companies that may not be considering imaging, or they might be brand new to working with an imaging core lab. We feel that educating and partnering with our sponsors to ensure that the imaging portion of their trial runs smoothly is really important to our team, really no matter the size or the phase of the study. And we believe that making a smaller investment in a collect and hold service upfront, it's really like insurance for your data, and it can help to save time and money for your program in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you very much,
You're
Catherine,
welcome.
again. And looks like we have reached the end of our Q&A sessions. Thank you once again for your time today. You can stay up to date on additional primary endpoint related contents by following our company page on LinkedIn. Also, please stay tuned for more information regarding Merit's upcoming webinars. Lastly, Merit will be attending ASCO annual meeting and DI at Boston to meet you at our booth to answer any further questions you may have. So please join us at the booth 25168 at the ASCO Chicago, and also booth 517 at the DIA for the Boston. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gene.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
thanks, Jean. Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Bye-bye.